Former NFL players, including a former Baltimore Ravens quarterback, are wildly comparing Lamar Jackson and Jalen Hurts. We talk about what the comparisons are, why they're being made in the first place, plus Rashod Bateman slamming the Chiefs, and so much more coming up next year on Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Oestreicher of Ravens Wire, here with you on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for being here today, making Locked On Ravens a part of your day, your first listen each and every single day as well. We're free and available for you on all podcasting platforms, including in video form on YouTube, where you can like and subscribe to the channel, and in audio form, where you can follow along and subscribe wherever you get your podcast. We're a 5-day-a-week daily Ravens podcast. Even in the offseason, we're officially in offseason mode after the Super Bowl was yesterday. So even in the offseason, we have you covered 5 days a week plus more of daily Ravens coverage. Today's episode of Locked On Ravens is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Offseason mode. Offseason is here. It's the beginning of the Ravens revenge season of the revenge season of the revenge season. You can go back as many revenge seasons as you want to. Of course, we're going to have free agency, going to have the draft, any trades, and it's over now. 2024-2025 season in the books. The Philadelphia Eagles are Super Bowl champions. Jalen Hurts gets a Super Bowl MVP and is a Super Bowl champion, and that has obviously sparked a lot of debate. Even before the Super Bowl, there were debates and conversations about what it would mean for Jalen Hurts' legacy if he won the Super Bowl. And a lot of those conversations included Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, and Joe Burrow. A couple of former players, including a Ravens quarterback, made some comparisons, and I'm interested to kind of dive into what they mean because some of them very unclear, but I think it sparks some interesting conversations, especially just about where the NFL is. And what I like to do here on Locked On Ravens is get all the different angles of opinions and storylines. So I'm excited to do that in the first part of the show with these comparisons of Lamar Jackson and Jalen Hurts. Then in the second part of the show, Rashod Bateman over the Super Bowl Media Week at Radio Row, he slammed the Chiefs, and we're going to talk about that. Plus, he actually talked a little bit about the MVP conversation, said Lamar Jackson was robbed, so he took up for his QB. And finally, I want to talk about the Super Bowl a little bit because there are some takeaways from that game that the Ravens, I think, can take to heart, especially when it comes to in the trenches. So we'll talk about that in the final part of the show. Let's dive into it. Lamar Jackson versus Jalen Hurts conversations. Again, Jalen is a Super Bowl champion. Lamar Jackson is not. I think that's where you have to start those conversations. But you had a former Ravens quarterback in Robert Griffin III, Lamar's former teammate. Obviously, RG3 was there. He mentored Lamar during his early years. And before the Super Bowl even started, RG3 tweeted out, if Jalen Hurts and the Eagles win the Super Bowl, he won't be in the same category of Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow, and Josh Allen. He will be in a category above them and the one that matters. Super Bowl champ with all due disrespect to anyone who thinks differently. FOH with the hate. I don't really know what RG3 is trying to say right here. There are many different interpretations, and the way that RG3 defended this take and the replies, I think he tried to play it off as, oh, I'm literally just stating the fact that if Jalen wins, he's going to have a Super Bowl championship, which Lamar won't. But I don't really get the point of tweeting it. Obviously, a lot of people took him saying that as, oh, if Jalen Hurts wins, he's a better quarterback and he's in a category above Lamar, Joe, and Josh, which, again, RG3 is like defending with his life that he's not saying. I mean, he responded to people saying if he wins the Super Bowl, he is in a different category. That's the fact. The Super Bowl champ category is a level only reached by winning a Super Bowl. He wins, he's in it, and they aren't. I mean, again, like, I don't really get the point of saying this. Like, yes, Jalen is a Super Bowl champion and Lamar is not. But is RG3 trying to say that there is a separate tier? Like, let's just say Mahomes and Hurts, right? Let's just put those two in that conversation because those are the two that played in the Super Bowl, right? Obviously, there are others that we can put in this conversation, like Stafford, etc. But if you put, Mahomes and Hurts and Stafford and all these active Super Bowl winning quarterbacks in that conversation, is it like you have that category and then you rank guys in that category and then you have the non-Super Bowl winning quarterbacks and you rank guys in that category? I don't know if that's what RG3 is trying to say. I don't think that makes a lot of sense. Like, yes, the way that the NFL, or I guess the way the NFL players are judged today, right? The way players are judged in today's NFL largely is tied to how many championships you have. And in the era of dynasties, the Patriots and obviously the Chiefs here, it's very hard for a quarterback to do that. Where like you have all these great QBs. Lamar is elite. Josh is elite. Joe is elite. All those guys. But if they can't get past Mahomes, and that is a conversation that has to be had, that's a separate one. But is it realistic or likely that all three of those guys will win a Super Bowl over the course of their careers, especially because, they're not getting any younger? I think probably my prediction is that 2 of the 3 will win Super Bowls and 1 will not. And that will put them in that conversation, I guess. But I guess what RG3 is saying here is like he still thinks Lamar and Josh and Joe are better than Jalen, but Jalen is better because he has the Super Bowl. Again, very confusing, because if he is just saying that, yeah, Jalen's in a different category than those 3 because of the championship, I don't really get the need to put that out on social media. I mean, RG3 was, he was very adamant that like he worded this tweet well. I think it could have been worded a little bit better if he wanted to get a certain point across, but just for the sake of doing it, we can compare Jalen Hurts and Lamar Jackson very quickly. And again, it's not taking away anything from Jalen. He got the job done. He was great in the Super Bowl for the most part. Had a couple of mistakes, but I still thought he was really good overall. Lamar, just career-wise, Lamar's played in about 35 more games than Jalen, so we gotta put that in the conversation as well. But he has a higher completion percentage, higher yards per attempt, more passing yards per game, and obviously with more games does come more things like passing yards, passing touchdowns, rushing yards. Jalen does have Lamar beating rushing touchdowns because of that tush push that we see very, very often, but Jalen, the only thing that he has over Lamar is the interceptions. But again, that can be said that Lamar has played in more games than Jalen. I personally think Lamar is a better quarterback than Jalen. It's not particularly close. There have been a lot of debates this year about Lamar, Josh, Joe. People try to sneak Jalen into that conversation. But look, I'm all here for supporting Jalen Hurts. Jalen is an awesome dude. He earned this Super Bowl. There's been a lot of unnecessary hate thrown Jalen's way. I think trying to, put Jalen in these conversations opens him up to that, where I don't think it's fair to him. I think Jalen is a good quarterback, and he's in the top 10 conversation, in my opinion. But I still think that if the conversation is, oh, Jalen is better than Lamar, Josh, and Joe, I'm not really there. But he does have what those 3 don't, and that is a Super Bowl. And that point of you are judged off of your championships in today's NFL, I mean, we all see it happen every single day when it comes to conversations around quarterbacks, because that's where the biggest swing happens if you have a championship versus you don't. Championship running back, I mean, look, would Saquon's legacy have been super affected if he had a Super Bowl versus he didn't? It wouldn't have been as affected as Jalen. But RG3, not the only former player that got in on this action. Ryan Clark, after the Super Bowl ended, so again, RG3's was before, Ryan Clark after. Ryan Clark said, Josh, Joe, and Lamar have had their shots at the throne. Joe beat Patrick and Josh had his days, but none of them have stood up across from 15 like Jalen Hurts. Maybe he's never mentioned in the same breath as the others, but for now there's a convo. Only he and Patrick are in Super Bowl MVP. When the football historians sit back and watch their matchup, it's going to be hard for them to tell who this era's guy was. Hurts has just been better. Congrats to the Eagles. This is an interesting conversation, because I do think that, look, championship is the ultimate goal. It's the ultimate goal for every team. A lot of these players, not all of them, but a lot of these players, they value championships. They value winning. And to me, that the other thing with how you judge a player, it is championship. It is personal individual stats. It is the eye test and all that goes into that. So again, what Ryan Clark is saying here when he says football historians sit back, watch their matchups, it's going to be hard for them to tell who this era's guy was. Some people have taken that as he is saying that Josh, Joe, and Lamar are not as good as Jalen Hurts. But again, it's all up for interpretation. I'm sure maybe Ryan Clark will specify this, and maybe we'll have a different conversation about it tomorrow if he does. Who knows? But I also think the other thing to take into the equation, because when people are talking about, at least for RG3's take, where it's like, okay, it's in a different category because Super Bowl championship, it was okay. So Trent Dilfer is better than Lamar Jackson, or Trent Dilfer is better than Dan Marino, or like any of that, like that conversation. The Eagles defense was unreal. One of the best Super Bowl performances we have ever seen. We'll talk about that a little more in the final part of the show. Lamar has had a defense like that. He had that last season, not this year, but he had it last year. You know, the Chiefs have had good defenses. The Bills have had good defenses. The Bengals, they haven't really had a good defense. But regardless, to me, it's not just about Jalen. Jalen did great. Jalen did his job. I'm not trying to take away from what Jalen did. But there is another conversation to be had, because, look, if we're going to punish Lamar Jackson for having good players on his side when it comes to MVP talks, well, I mean, that conversation has to be had for every quarterback, right? In terms of not only MVP, but Super Bowl and legacy and whatnot. And I do think it all is a little bit overblown, right? I do. And having these conversations kind of takes it down a rabbit hole that isn't necessarily needed. But, you know, that's just the way that NFL discourse is these days. I think especially how, you know, championships have never not been important, but it wasn't like we were completely discrediting. I mean, look, Dan Marino is regarded as one of the best quarterbacks of all time, and he never won a championship. Where I feel like for quarterbacks that don't win championships nowadays, yes, there are Hall of Famers, and there will be Hall of Famers quarterback-wise that never win championships, but it feels like it's going to be much more of a blemish on records than it would have been back in the day, or that it was back in the day. So I'm interested to see how these conversations evolve. And look, if we hear more about this, and I'm sure we will over the course of today, we'll definitely talk about it tomorrow. But I guess some early teaser on how that all will happen, I don't know. But Jalen won. Congratulations to him. Congratulations to the Eagles. We'll get into Ravens takeaways in the final part of the show from that Super Bowl, because I do think that the Ravens will have some opportunities to maybe mirror a little bit of what Philly did. But coming up in the second part of the show, we're talking about Rashod Bateman slamming the Chiefs and slamming the NFL for the MVP situation for Lamar Jackson. And the Chiefs thing, let's just say Rashod Bateman is not like the Chiefs. So be sure to stay tuned. Lots to get to here on Locked On Ravens. First, the show is brought to you by LinkedIn. As a small business owner, your work doesn't end when the clock hits 5. Your business is always on your mind, which means that when it's time to hire, you need a partner that works just as hard as you do. That's where LinkedIn Jobs comes in. When you clock out, LinkedIn clocks in. LinkedIn makes it easy to post your job for free, share it with your network, and get qualified candidates all in one place. Post your job. LinkedIn's new feature can help you write job descriptions and then quickly get your job in front of the right people with deep candidate insights. And here's a pro tip. Add the hashtag hiring frame to your profile picture to double your reach to qualified candidates. No wonder 72% of small businesses say LinkedIn helps them find high-quality hires. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. We are back, our second segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher still here with you on this Monday edition of the show. Off-season fully here. The Eagles beat the Chiefs in Super Bowl 59. They do not let Mahomes and the Chiefs get the three-peat, and I know that a lot of people were certainly rooting against that, rooting for Philly to, I don't even know if you want to call it, this whole thing about the Chiefs being this big Titan favorite and whatnot. I mean, the Eagles, they have a heck of a squad up and down. In my opinion, the most balanced roster in the NFL. That's why I picked Philly to win personally. And I know one person who's very happy that the Chiefs did not win, and that is Rashod Bateman, who during the Super Bowl Radio Row, he ended up talking about the Chiefs and I would say his dislike of Kansas City. Now, he was asked about the Super Bowl, who he wants to win, and he said, I definitely want the Eagles to win, but we all know how that goes. Obviously, I'm sure talking about maybe the luck they get, and by luck I mean some ref help. And he was asked by Adam Ronis, why do you want the Eagles to win? You just don't want to see the Chiefs win? And Rashod Bateman says, I just don't have respect for them anymore, and I think we all see why. Some stuff just goes too far. It affects other people and other people's lives. It affects other people's outcomes. Also said that, Saquon deserved it, gave some shout-outs to Saquon. And I think that, first of all, Rashad saying this is, kind of bold just to say I just don't have respect for them. I'm sure that will, in the era today of bulletin board material, who knows? It might never even reach the Chiefs' ears. But if it does, I don't know. I'm not saying it's going to backfire or anything, but I'm sure if the Chiefs do find it some way, somehow, they might use it as Baltimore material. I don't know. But I think that Rashad is saying the quiet part out loud for a lot of current players. And I don't think a lot of current players would say what Rashod Bateman said here, but I think a lot of players probably feel the way that Rashad does. And for multiple different reasons, not just for like the whole, okay, the ref sheet for Kansas City narrative, or, they get all this help, da-da-da-da-da. But I also just think for the fact that, fans and, enjoyers of the NFL definitely want parity, right? That's a big thing. I've talked about it before, where when you go directly from the Patriots dynasty to the Chiefs dynasty with really no layover there, especially in the AFC, it gets tiring to see the same team in the Super Bowl all the time, the same team win the Super Bowl all the time. I think the players feel that way too. And, some will go, quote unquote, ring chasing. We've seen players join Kansas City, and we obviously saw it with New England as well, of players going there and trying to win. But it also just, I think that when players see what happens in Kansas City, especially, with the flopping, let's do like the flopping. That's been a new thing. I guess not new, but like it's had more of an emphasis here, especially recently with the Chiefs. When that happens and there's a big call, or there's a phantom PI call that benefits the Chiefs, or roughing the passer or whatnot, what Rashod Bateman is saying here, and I do not disagree with him, is that it does affect other people in their lives and outcomes, because that could be the difference. That could end players' tenure with a team if it goes in the bad direction, or their only opportunity at making the playoffs, at going to the Super Bowl, at winning a Super Bowl. That affects other people's outcomes. And I don't think there'd be any issue if, it was all quote unquote like legit with Kansas City. I think the Patriots and the Chiefs, two different definitions of like the quote unquote legit thing. Obviously, New England had multiple scandals, Deflategate, Spygate, etc. With the Chiefs, it's more so just like, look, it's blatantly obvious that the Chiefs do get calls more often. I don't know the stats behind it, but just even the eye test tells you. And look, it's not like the Chiefs get the most calls every year or the least calls against them every year. I just think high leverage situations and game swinging moments, you see it almost every time. And look, 7 straight AFC championship games. I'm not saying the Chiefs are a bad team that only gets helped out by the refs. I think that would be selling Kansas City extremely short, and honestly, kind of disrespecting what they have done. I think it's almost kind of like the Brady Patriots, where it's like, man, I dislike those teams so much. And I remember just watching them take the Ravens out year after year. And the Ravens obviously got the best of them a couple times, but like you hated them, right? You're just like, man, I hate these teams. But outside of like the scandal stuff, which obviously you lose respect there, you respected the greatness of what they were able to do. Now, again, scandals aside, I think that obviously makes you lose respect for a team like that. Whereas for Kansas City, yeah, they're a good team. Like they've gotten to the championship, they've gotten to Super Bowls, they've won them. You got to respect what they've been able to do. But then with the whole flopping thing and the refs thing, that does make you lose. Like, okay, how much respect? And Rashod Bateman saying he doesn't have respect for him anymore. Again, I feel like he's saying what a lot of players feel. And he was able to say it and put himself out there, be bold about it, certainly bold. And Rashad also kind of went on another media tour defending Lamar Jackson and his quarterback. He said, quote, "Hope I don't get in trouble for this. He should have won MVP. He was robbed. Lamar was all pro and had him beat in every category." That meaning Josh Allen, him meaning Josh Allen. When you watch the game and look at the numbers, what are we valuing here? And look, I agree. And everybody's probably going to say, oh, what do you mean, Rashad? Of course he's taken up for his quarterback. Well, yeah, first of all, like, okay. But second of all, what do we value? Like, that is a legitimate question. What do we value when it comes to the MVP? Because it is a yearly award that changes. Obviously, last season, a lot of people were upset that Lamar won it because of his stats. And my argument to that is Lamar clearly was the best player in the league last season when it comes to eye test. And he had the best regular season team. The Ravens were the number 1 seed in the AFC. And, for Josh Allen last season, at least, I know the turnovers were the key factor in his race not winning. And Dak Prescott, he had the better stats, but the Cowboys, they weren't the best team in the regular season that year. The Chiefs were the number 1 seed in the AFC this year. The Bills were not the best team in the league, in my opinion, this season. That probably would go to the Eagles, Lions, I guess, if you want to put them in that category as well. It was a 1 seed difference. Like, again, we don't have to talk about it all over again. We also had a couple bonus episodes this weekend on Locked On Ravens, so you can go check out some of the other MVP conversation we have. We're not going to get into that all here today, but it just feels like what Rashad is saying and his interpretation of the whole award is just like, well, when you have a guy beating every category, plus he is an all-pro, Lamar got the first team all-pro, and then those same voters turn around and they say, actually, Lamar's first team all-pro, but Josh Allen's the MVP. Is it they're just cutting it down the middle and saying, we feel bad for Josh, so here's one thing for Lamar, here's one thing for Josh. If anything, they should have just been co-MVPs at that point. Like, just saying, okay, well, we're gonna feel good about ourselves because we're gonna give Lamar something, but then we have to kind of give Josh something here, right? Because we can't not let him walk home empty-handed. That to me is bogus, and I think the way the reaction that current players, former players, the NFL world reacted, Josh Allen MVP voters have tried to explain themselves, and they have gotten laughed at by their colleagues on set, which we talked about on Saturday. So, we talked a lot about that. We talked about how other former players just laughed and said, "Oh, no, like I'm shocked." That's what the conversation was about Josh Allen's MVP. So, again, it's not about Josh winning it. It's not about Josh winning it. It's about Lamar losing it and the historic precedent that comes before, first team all-pro quarterback not being the MVP. You got to go back a while for that in multiple different categories, sometimes even never. So Rashad sticking up for his quarterback. I absolutely love it. Coming up in the final part of the show, we'll talk about some Ravens Super Bowl takeaways from that Eagles and Chiefs game. Now the Ravens can build their roster to hopefully get over the hump next year and get back to the big dance. So be sure to stay tuned. We'll have to get to on Locked On Ravens. First, the show is brought to you by FanDuel. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you missed the opening tip-off or want to bet on fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action, and if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. I love using FanDuel's live betting feature because it keeps every moment of the game exciting. Whether I'm backing my team for a late-game rally or picking a player to hit a clutch three, I never feel like I missed my chance. Plus, the app is easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Back here on Locked On Ravens, Kevin Oestreicher still talking with you here. Offseason day one, officially. I know for Ravens fans, offseason, it's been here now for a couple of weeks after that Buffalo loss, but the NFL is officially in offseason mode. And we are in offseason mode too on Locked On Ravens, but that doesn't mean we're going anywhere. We're 5 days a week all the way around. This is episode 1,441 consecutively for me here. I have not missed a weekday doing this show since I started it all the way back in 2019. So if you want daily Ravens coverage in season, off season, be sure to hit that like and subscribe button in video form and follow along in audio form for 5 days a week of that daily Ravens coverage. Now, the Eagles and Chiefs played a game yesterday. At least the Eagles did. I'm not so sure the Chiefs did. It was 40-22. The final score, just absolute domination on Philly's part. The Chiefs got a couple of garbage time touchdowns at the end. Casey outscored Philly 16-6 there in the fourth quarter. But this was one of the best defensive performances I've ever seen in the Super Bowl. And I know a lot of people have said that. Obviously, the Ravens 2000 defense being another one that was an all-time performance. But there are some takeaways that I think we can look at from this game for Baltimore, particularly on the Philly side and how they did things. 6 sacks for Philadelphia on this Chiefs team. Now, the Chiefs offensive line, they weren't great. In fact, they were pretty awful in this game. It was just pressure after pressure after pressure. But here is the most impressive part about how Philly was able to get in Patrick Mahomes' head, pressure him, speed up that clock. From Seth Walder, ESPN research says the Eagles blitzed Patrick Mahomes on 0 of his 42 dropbacks. Mahomes is the 6th quarterback in Super Bowl history to not be blitzed a single time. All 6 quarterbacks lost. This to me is the formula. This is absolutely the formula, and it lines up perfectly with what we have said here on Locked On Ravens, really ever since the season ended, even dating back before that, if we're being honest. The Ravens need a game wrecker. It is a pass rusher, is an edge. Odafe Owe had a great season last year by his career standards, right? Double-digit sacks. Kyle Van Noy has been an amazing bargain for Baltimore and has completely outplayed his contract. Tavius Robinson, great run defender. I'm expecting a huge year from Tavius in 2025. But if you cannot consistently pressure the quarterback without blitzing, so many of these elite quarterbacks these days, including Lamar Jackson, by the way, can just beat the blitz like it's nothing. Like it's nothing. The way that this works is if you only need to blitz 4, if you're not blitzing on plays, it allows you to obviously drop more guys back in coverage, build like a shield there, and you generate that pressure with domination, and it's just going to force all sorts of problems. That, to me, has always been a key success here, but watching the Eagles just completely get to Mahomes over and over, I've never seen Patrick Mahomes look that rattled ever, even in the Tampa Bay Super Bowl loss the Chiefs had to Tom Brady, where that offensive line still was getting beat up on every single play. It's so important to have your trenches right. And we can take let's do the flip side for Kansas City. I mean, the Chiefs' offensive line was terrible, and they have some good dudes on there. The Ravens have to get their offensive line rebuild right, or I guess retooling, if you want to call it that, right. You have a couple of pieces if you're Baltimore, Linderbaum and Rosengarten, but you have to find some more mainstay players you can put there for years to come, because Ronnie Stanley's a free agent. We don't know how that's going to work, but he's not a long-term answer. Pasha McCary, not a long-term answer. He's also a free agent. Daniel Faalele, I think he played a lot better than my expectation for him, but I don't think he's the long-term answer for the Ravens at that position. All 5, you can't have 5 all-pros. I mean, technically you can, but I'm not expecting the Ravens to have 5 all-pros on their offensive line. But we saw it be a major problem at times for Baltimore this season when they couldn't block for Lamar. And Lamar is Houdini himself, right? He can make something out of nothing, and the sack stats will look low for Baltimore's offensive line. That, in my opinion, was more of a Lamar stat than it was an offensive line stat in 2024 and honestly over the course of his career. So Baltimore has to be able to shore up their trenches. I know there's going to be a lot of conversation this offseason about cornerback, about safety, about wide receiver, the whole Mark Andrews situation. What do they do there? There are going to be other positions they're going to have to look at too. But a game record edge, I would love Myles Garrett in Baltimore. I'll just tell you now, though, that's probably not happening. I don't think Cleveland trades him in division, and I don't think the Ravens give up that package. I would do it, but I don't think the Ravens do. But getting a game wrecker, does Dallas move on from Micah Parsons, and is that something crazy that would happen? I don't know. Is Khalil Mack an option for this team? I just think you have to have another solid guy there, and not just solid. I'm talking like 5 notches up from solid. I'm talking elite, because you look at some of these teams these days and how far they're getting. Even though the Chiefs didn't win, George Karlaftis is an incredible pass rusher. And obviously, Chris Jones on the interior is great. But, with the Ravens having Nnamdi Madubuike and Travis Jones, I think those are 2 incredible building blocks on the interior of your line. I don't know if you have that long-term building piece yet, or that game wrecker. Can Owe take that step? I don't know what Owe's ceiling is. It might be what we saw this season. I'm not sure. He's going to obviously work this offseason and get better, but I think we saw still, like, he had 3 sacks in the game against Pittsburgh and then disappeared for like 4 weeks. So you have to get more consistency out of Owe, but it's not just that. You have to have a better number 1 option. Not that Owe can't be a number 1. I'm not saying that, but I think you just have to have a better option there, so that you can have Owe as a 2 and Van Noy as a 3, and then Robinson being your early down guy, because you can't trust David Ojabo anymore. Is Adisa Isaac going to have a year 2 breakout? He could. I'm not counting anybody out right now, but I don't think you can put all your eggs in the David Ojabo and Adisa Isaac basket, especially not in the Ojabo basket. So pass rush is going to be so big. I mean, the Eagles, between Josh Sweat, Jalen Carter, Milton Williams, Jordan Davis, that list, Nolan Smith, on and on and on and on. That D-line, they've built that up over the past handful of seasons, and it is just absolutely electric. Brandon Graham came back for this game. So that's what Baltimore has to mirror. They do have pieces, but can you get that final big piece? When people talk about what's the big move the Ravens should make this offseason, it is the pass rusher. It absolutely is a pass rusher. I don't think there's any ifs, ands, or buts about that, in my opinion. So hopefully Baltimore can find a way, whether it's through trade, free agency. Does a guy fall in their lap at 27 in the draft? I don't know, but it's going to be intriguing to see how they end up moving about that whole situation, because they do need a game record edge. And I think this game against Kansas City for the Eagles, we looked at what the Eagles did to Kansas City, certainly told you that, at least in my opinion, for this Ravens team. That's all I have for you here today, though, on Locked On Ravens. Thank you so much for tuning into the show. Again, we're here for you all off season, 5 days a week plus more. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button in video form and follow along in audio form as well for 5 days a week of daily Ravens coverage. And of course, I'll see you right back here tomorrow talking more Ravens on Locked On Ravens.